Buongiorno, anche questo panel sarà in inglese. So welcome everybody, and welcome also to Federico and Pouya. And today we are going to discuss a very challenging and hot topic, but also highly complex, which regard the growth and the development of youth academies at European level. And I have few slides that will support my chat with Federico and Pouya, because we did undertake last year a very complex study. It's probably the largest ever study undertaken to assess the transition of academy player to first team at European level. The study was launched earlier this year, specifically in August, and is also accessible on the ECA website. So what was actually the purpose of the study? It was basically understanding the process of transition to first team, from academy to first team. What is working well, what is not working, what are the best practices at European level in terms of successful transition, and what are the obstacles to successful transition, whether it's regulatory, whether it's the lack of competition and playing time, or any other aspect that can influence a successful transition. But how do we actually define a successful transition? We had a task force made of representatives of course, the ECA, and Pouya was leading those efforts, with academy managers or members of the academy of 4 very major clubs, being Arsenal, Ajax, Benfica, and Monaco. And a successful transition was considered when a player accumulates 450 minutes, therefore 5 full matches over a certain period of time in first team, and we are only referring to competitive football, so friendly matches are excluded. The transition can be direct when it happens in the club for which a player has actually grown up, or indirect when the transition happens outside of that club. As you can see, from a methodology perspective, we had 12 case studies, we had 13 in-depth interviews with club managers, academy leaders, sports psychologists. We had a club survey with 95 respondents throughout Europe, and we analyzed thousands of debuts and transition over the 5 period that we assessed, starting from the season 18-19. We review all 55 UEFA member associations, plus the 5 second division league of the Big Five. I'm going to start asking a question to Federico, who was very much in charge of the Next Gen project. And I would like to ask him, what were the obstacles, the difficulties that you encountered when the project was launched? And looking back after quite a few years, what would you consider the success of that project?
Well, it's an interesting question, because we faced a lot of problems when we start with the project, because, you know, in Italy the system is a little bit different. There is the loan system, like development of players. So we tried to start in 2018, but no one say, okay, you can start. And we received the authorization from the Football Federation only at the end of June. So we started in July without the stadium for the official match, without the coach. So it was really hard. But the most complicated things to do, it was incredible, because we have to convince our player to stay in the club, because they get used to go on loan. So we fought for a lot of a year to start with the project, and when we are ready, the player want to go out. And they ask me why I have to stay in this project. We are the only club in Italy that make the second team. I want to go on loan in Serie B or in third division. It was really hard. And the success of the project, I don't know, because it's a long-term project. when I look to Barça B or Real Madrid Castilla, they have an history of more than 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, the project started in 2018. So I think it's too early now to say if the project is good, but in March 2022, the board said to us that a minimum of 3 players coming from the path of the next gen must be always in the roster of the first team. Actually, I left Juventus now. I don't know in the future, but actually in the roster of the first team, there are 5 players coming from the path of the next gen. And in the last summer, during the transfer market, they sold a lot of players of the next gen for around 80 million. So I think at the moment is a good project, and I hope in the future they can go ahead.
Well, I would say that for the moment, there is a good return on investment, which actually lead me, Pouya, to the next question addressed to you. I mean, the project of Juventus was very much endorsed from the top end, and I would say Andrea Agnelli was very supportive of it. How important is the role of the top management in ensuring the success of an academy project?
No, absolutely. Very good question, Andrea. And I would like to say that, first of all, investing in youth football, investing in academies, it's a long-term investment. It's not something that comes overnight. It usually takes years, and sometimes for some clubs, it can take a decade. Mm-hmm. Based on that, it's really important for clubs to establish their DNA and also to establish their business model. And if they consider that their business model is actually to develop players, to transition them to the first team, to make them play and or to sell them, then you need to clarify this vision to everyone, to establish a long-term strategy that is shared throughout the entire club. Everyone needs to work in the same direction. Communication is really key there. And this is only after reaching this cohesion that you can actually hire the right people that will make it happen. And I will give some example here. You need to hire, for example, a head coach of the first team that will provide minutes to these youngsters, You need to put some transition-related objectives to the contract of the sporting director or the technical director. You need also to talk to your youth coaches to make them understand that development is actually more important than results sometimes. And we have very good example of that actually in Europe, in some so-called developing markets like Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, but also very much actually in Italy. And we saw it, or we will see it in the slides, with, for example, Atalanta, NFC Internazionale Milano. Mm-hmm. They actually managed to develop players and still be competitive at the highest level, both nationally and internationally. And this is a great example for the rest of Europe.
And if you would think, you see many clubs through your work at the ECA. If you would think of one or two clubs that have been particularly successful from this perspective of endorsing a strategy from the very top end, could you give maybe some example of a relatively small club and maybe a large club?
Definitely. I will start most probably with a smaller club, let's say Dinamo Tbilisi in Georgia. They do not benefit from high TV rights revenues, high sponsorship deals, do not even benefit from ticketing, in their stadium. So they had no other choice, or at least they wanted to base their business model on developing players, making them play with the first team, reaching the national team, and then selling them in the biggest European league and, for example, the Serie A. I would like to say that everyone at this club is aligned on the fact that the goal of the club is to produce players. And when I say everyone, is from the top management to the head coach, technical director, the youth coaches, everyone involved knows that the aim is to put this player on the pitch with the first team, develop them, and sell them. And then from a bigger club perspective, I would like to say most probably the Portuguese club, Benfica and Sporting, of course, Ajax, Feyenoord in the Netherlands. You can also feel the DNA, really, when you go there. You feel that there is only one vision, and this vision is to develop high potential or high performance players, and it's actually breathed not only by the club, but by the city, and sometimes also by the country.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions that for which we receive 93 actually answers, it was based on your experience. Please rate from 1 to 4 the importance of the following factor to the success of a player transition. And the mental strength of a player, the psychological aspect, Federico, were the top rated one, although they are all rated quite high. But would you really consider, looking back at the success of many of the players that you have seen in your career, being mental the most important factor determining the success of a player?
I think the mental and psychological strengths are important in every different phase of the career of a player. Also, and especially at the end of the career, but during the career and also at the end of the career. And during the transition phase, I think is the psychological is very important, because, you know, is a phase, is the only phase in the career of a player that he can play in different teams of the same club. So usually when a player of the under-19 receive a call for a match of the second team, he's happy. When the coach of the first team call him for a period in the first team, he's happy, the agent is happy, the family, the girlfriends, everyone is happy. But what happens when you have to go this step back? When maybe the club decide that there is a match of the second team that is important that you go to play in the second team. In that moment, you can see and look at the behavior of the player. If you are smile only when you go up, for me, you are not the right player. You are not the right mentality. Sometimes when you go in the first team, you forget your teammates, former teammates of the under-19 or the second team. It's not good. And for me, the players that have a good career are in the right way, and they play with the same attitude, with the same sacrifice, with the same happiness, with all the shirt of the club, not only in the first team.
Very interesting. Pouya, let's leave aside the technical, the physical, and the tactical aspect. Let's focus on the social elements, which is basically the environment that surrounds a player, where in today's football, already at a young age, they can see potentially money and potential significant earning, the role of the family, the pressure that they place, the agents, the friends, the media, and in particular in today's world, the social media role. How important is this? Which weight does it have on the success or the failure on the transition of a player?
No, absolutely. It's a very, very good question, because the transition actually from the academy to the first team, it's also a change of statutes. They are moving from a statute of, let's say, star player in the academy to entering in a dressing room with more mature experience and also international players, and they need actually to find their place or to make their place to be integrated in the first team, both from a social and football perspective. This is already very much complicated, and as Federico said, you know, then you have the back and forth between the first team and the academy. Sometimes you are on the bench as well, so it's already complicated to define your own identity, let's say. In addition to that, and you rightly mentioned it, Andrea, there are a lot of external factors that can be very detrimental to the player's success, actually. The family, of course, I would like to say social media, putting the player under a lot of pressure. They are very much exposed and they need to manage that. And also sometimes the agents who are favoring more short-term success over long-term development of the player. And one thing that we saw in this study and that we can see in general is that clubs can a little bit mitigate this external aspect by actually having people dedicated to this transition phase. For example, a transition loan manager, transition manager, psychologist, creating an individual development plan for the player, something really based on his or her own needs, and that is shared with the family, with the player, and of course, with the agents. And in addition to that, to educate this player of course, before in the academy, but also during this transition phase regarding some very important topics that are how to manage communication and social media, how to find the right agent, and of course, how also to manage your wealth.
Yeah. And remaining on the issue of communication, because there are so many stakeholders that are involved. So there is the first team, there is the academy, there are the agents, there is the family, a sort of entourage. You mentioned the girlfriend, for example, Federico. In the context of a very, I would say, complex environment, how do you ensure that there is a proper flow of information from the academy up to the first team? So in your case, I think you work with twice with Allegri, Pirlo, and Sarri during your time. How did you ensure that there was a proper flow of communication and that the young star could be identified, brought into the training of the first team, sometimes being selected for the first team?
In my experience, when I arrived in Juventus in 2012, there was a wall inside Vinovo. Academy, first team. Completely different vision, completely different strategy. I think it's a problem of the Italian football. And when we start with the project of the second team, for us the second team has been the bridge between the academy and the first team. So we have connected all the activities. And in the last year, the very important things were we had the meeting of the sportive area, and all the people around the table. There was the director of the first team, director of academy, director of the loan player manager, and I think I was lucky because I had a lot of people around me, very good, because our director of the second team, Giovanni Manna, now in Naples. The loan player was Marco Tolini, actually in Genoa. Chief scout Matteo is in Granada. We had a lot of people that work together with the same vision. Mm-hmm. And in another phase of the club, we have a golden age with the results of the first team, but in that period, we build the new project with incredible people like Pablo Longoria that worked with us for a long time, with Javier Ribalta, Fabio Paratici, and Mr. Marotta and Mr. Agnelli that lead the process. So all these people, for me, work together with one vision. And for me, it's very important. And sometimes I'm so sorry when I ask to some director of the first team, I say, what do you think about your Primavera team? And he said, but I never see a match of my Primavera team. I have no time. But why? You send scout in Brazil or in South America, you can see your academy. But that's happened in our industry, unfortunately.
Nobody is listening us, so I forgot Conte in the list of the coach. Who would you say out of the four that I've mentioned, Conte, Allegri, Pirlo, Sarri, was the one that to a certain extent show, I would almost say, use the word interest in the development of the youth academy?
You know, when Conte was in the club, and the first Allegri, the level of our Primavera and the level of our first team, the gap was too high. Yep. So it was impossible to create this flow. With the second team, we reduced the gap, and in the second part of with the Pirlo, with the Sarri, and with the Allegri, the process was better because with the second team, when you have to choose players that are 20, 21, that play every week a professional match against in third division, very tough match. So they are ready to train with the first team and to play with the first team. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's impossible to compare the experience of Conte or the experience of Thiago Motta now that I think can use the player that, like Savona, play for 3 years in third division before going in the first team.
And nobody expected this at the beginning of the season to be so successful, I would say. Pouya, let's move to one important aspect that has been raised during the study that we undertook, which is actually playing time, and the difficulty somehow to give sufficient playing time to players at European level. You might have noticed at the very beginning of this discussion that I showcased the most successful club with transition. And you noticed that there were 6 clubs in England, 5 of the top 6. The only one not present was actually Tottenham. And I was thinking that probably the fact that they also have a third domestic competition is one of the reasons of the success of the transition that we can see in England. But what is the overall picture of playing time in Europe? What is working? What about the adjustment to the youth league at UEFA level? What is your view on that?
I think that we all agree that the competition structure and format play an essential role in players' development. Youth players, they actually need the right challenge as much as possible at the right time. And that will actually help facilitate the transition, as exactly Federico said, the transition from the academy to the first team. And that's exactly why maybe you created this under-23 team at that time. And I would like to say that we sent a survey at ECA. You know, we got responses from more than 150 professional clubs from almost all the European countries. And we observed that actually in the youngest age categories, so under 15, under 16, and under 17, they play on average between 25 to 30 league games. In the oldest age categories, so from under 18 to above, they play on average 30, 35 games. In addition to that, maybe 8 or 10 friendly games per season, and only 1 international tournament per year, or even 0 in most of the cases. Then we ask the question, how many competitive games actually do they play? Because the number of games is just a number. What we want to know is what's the challenge that they face. And we observe that in the youngest age category, the percentage of competitive games is between 25 to 30%, which means that 70% of the time, unfortunately, they do not play games that are competitive for them. And in addition to that, as I said before, they do not play international games because they go maximum to 1 international tournament per season. So we observe that there is a lack of competitive games in the youth categories. There is a lack of international exposure, so playing against different teams with different philosophies, different football cultures. And this actually creates a bigger gap between the academy and the first team. So that's why we are discussing right now with different stakeholders, of course, governing bodies, leagues, leagues or national associations, ECA and clubs, to find solution with these younger age categories. Doesn't need to be always big competitions like the Youth League, who actually fulfills perfectly its role of development of players, but maybe something more regional.
And even friendly, I would say.
And even
because
friendly.
When a young team, I don't know, Inter Milan playing with the Manchester United, even a friendly, those young kids are going to give their best. Would you agree?
You know, I completely agree with Pouya, and in our experience, when start the UEFA Youth League, many of our players of our Primavera play for the first time a match abroad in the Youth League when it was 19. For this reason, with 2 incredible director for me, Luigi Milani and Massimiliano Scaglia, start a process, and we create in the football base 2 teams for every different age. 1 team play for the Italian competition, for the regional competition, and all the other team every week go abroad to make international matches.
Friendly matches.
Friendly matches. But now, when the 2003 arrive at the end of the path of the academy, we think that they have more than 50 experience abroad, since when they are 8, under 10, under 11, under 12. So it's very important for me, the international competition.
And the exposure that they need. They need playing time, so that's very, very clear. Let me move. We only have 5 minutes left, 5-6 minutes. So this is the level of investment happening in first division team in the big five leagues. According to UEFA, it's a value of 2020. I think this number has gone up in the meanwhile. So to you, Federico, I would like to ask you where Juve would sit today as an overall level of investment. And Pouya, you speak to a lot of clubs throughout Europe. What are the maximum budget that you are seeing in top clubs that have a very high, let's say, level of revenue, let's say 200, 250 million and above, and the relatively small club? So maybe let's start with you, Federico.
In Juventus, in the period that I worked for Juventus, we spent, for sure, we invest more money, for sure, than the average in the Serie A, but our model, our benchmark was not the average of the Serie A, but the top 10 club in Europe. So we look at United, Real Madrid, Barca, Arsenal, so we can compare how much they spend. We can compare with the average of Serie A, with the best respect of all the other clubs, but we have to look to a different benchmark. So for sure we invest more money.
Which lead perfectly to Pouya, to what I was asking. So what the top club would spend? And
I would like to say it's not always the top clubs that spend the most, first of all, but the one that really believe, as we said before, have a clear DNA and philosophy in investing in youth players. From my own experience, the biggest budget that I have seen so far is around 20 million per season. Annual, absolutely, per season. But this is, I would like to say, an exception. Then we have a few big clubs, of course, from the big markets, spending between 10, 15, and 17, 18. Then I would like to say maybe 10, 15%, and these are coming from the what we call the developing leagues.
Yeah.
So, for example, Belgium, Netherlands, Portugal, they spend on average between 8, 10 to 12 millions. But the vast majority of clubs, and we all also have to talk about it, they have a budget that is inferior to 2 million euros per season, but they can still continue to do a good job. They still develop good players, and they still have this clear philosophy of offering minutes, because that's absolutely the most important, as we said before. It's offering playing time at the youngest age in the first team that will make the difference. So whatever the budget, you can still develop players, and of course it will be more easy if you have a little bit more means, definitely.
But Federico, this number have gone up in the meanwhile, right?
I think so, but when if you look at this slide, you know that we discuss about academy in Italy in the summer, when when the national team don't achieve some results, so the discussion is in the academy, okay. And in this slide there is a fake news that we always say, that in Italy we don't invest in the academy. You can see that we are in the average.
Yeah.
In Spain, they spend less than us, but they have the best results. So maybe we have to change the way which we work in the academy, not only the money that we invest.
Yeah, it's a perfect comment that basically lead to the next analysis. I will just tell you what we have showcased here, and then I will ask you to comment. So what we did, we took all players that we have in our football benchmark database, more than 10,500 players, that are aged below 22, and that have at least a value of 15 million euros. So that were the filtering criteria. So we have 117 players, and then in the table here, basically we can see the nationality of those players, the league where they are playing on the right-hand side, and the average market value. And you're absolutely right, Federico. When you look at the previous slide, the level of investment is not too far away from the rest of Europe. But if you look at the results, especially when you compare with France, Spain, and England, Italy is quite behind. Why is that?
Why is I saw Pablo, and
yeah.
When Pablo comes in our club, we had a lot of discussion about the way that we train in the academy. So with Pablo and with Javier Ribalta, we fight a lot, because they say, but you are crazy. You work in the academy like you work in the first team. It's not correct. But we say, but we wanna win the trophy. We wanna win Scudetto. No, it's completely different. So we changed the vision. We have. It was really important that period because we changed our mind. In the last 10 years, Juventus won only one Scudetto. We tried to build player to change completely the philosophy of the club in the academy.
Pouya, do you feel to comment on this one?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, we can see that when you invest in youth football and when you offer playing time opportunities to youth players, you can actually benefit later on from high potential, or I would even say high performant athletes within your team. So actually investing in youth football shows that you can benefit from it from a financial and also sporting point of view. And one other thing that I notice here is that if you look at the countries, you know, that are present, these are also countries that have a real development plan for the young players. We all know the EPPP in England, but if you look at Spain, France, Brazil, Argentina, they offer a lot of space to these young players to play within the first team, to play in the highest or the second highest division. So all together, you know, clubs, national association, league, they work together with the same aim, developing young talent, transitioning them to the first team, and making them being, I would like to say, high-performant athletes at a very young age.
Federico,
We have also to consider that there are different rules in different countries. So, you know, in Italy, when we talk about academy, we have to know that the rules in the academy are different from Spain, for example. So if you are based in a region that's poor of talent, you know that until they are 14, you can sign a player of another region. So it's not easy if you are based in a region, in a poor region of talent, to create a large base of player to grow inside the club. And recently I received a book, I ordered a book because it was impossible to find, is the geography of the all the Italian players that play in Serie A in more than 80 years. They saw where they are born. They
can you tell us just the most
Yes, you know, the 25% of the players that play in the history of Serie A born in Lombardia. There are regions there with, I don't know, 1% of the players come from that region. There is only one city that never has one player that play in Serie A in the history. So if you are based in a rich region with a lot of talent, is easier. I know that in Spain you can sign a player that is in another part of the country, also if he is under 8. I don't want to say it's correct.
Yeah.
I say that different rules. So when we consider the work of the single academy in Italy, we have to consider the different
regulation.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We are done with this session. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Pouya, for your contribution.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.